see if we. Okay. Well, it means we need to get started. Okay.
And
Well,
maybe
because
we'll have her introduce herself, and maybe
well, that's what we'll do.
I think she rebooted.
Oh, okay. We'll try that. Okay. Well, today we've been in the professional learning community going through all of the critical issues, what it takes to write a grant or what it takes to perform a grant. And we started out with recruitment, and we've gone through partnerships and screening. And today we're going to be doing the curriculum, which is the EPA, really the EPA, big part of EPA's work. And then we'll be doing later on, we'll be doing a session on tracking and placement, and then we'll wind up before the grants are due, probably with a session on landmines, of things that you may want to look at before you submit your grant to make sure things are in order. Things like making sure your budget numbers are consistent and that they support each other rather than being in conflict. So today we'll be talking about how you select a curriculum, and this goes for existing grantees as well as new grantees, or as well as people who are writing their curriculum. Selecting your curriculum, finding how do you find qualified trainers, how do you incorporate health and safety, which people often forget about or pass over, which is really important. And then we'll talk a little bit about unsupported training. And of course, in addition to that, we'll talk about the news and what's happening at EPA. But so let's get started. Before that, we'll just introduce ourselves because we can. And Steve, do you want to start out?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to our friends in Alaska who are on today. So it's good to see everyone. My name's Steve Fenton, and I'm with HMTRI, and I'm located down here in Florida.
Okay, I'm Mike Sinue. I'm facilitating the PLC today. I'm with HMTRI. David?
Yes, I'm David Cantu, with a citizen of Rosario, and I'm also a member of the Rio Grande Council of Governments on their board. And I'm just here getting educated on how this process works.
Great. Well, so it's good to talk to people who are just getting the feel for it, because there's this year and then there's next year, and there might be a time when you're ready to jump in and get your program going. Nolan?
I'm Nolan Curtis. I'm with HMTRI, coming to you from Aiken, South Carolina. So good morning, good afternoon, and welcome.
Diana, it's your turn.
Good afternoon. I'm Diana Napier with the Workforce Development Board here in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Deborah?
Hello, Deborah Love with E3 Solution, which is a nonprofit. I'm in Alabama, working all over Alabama, especially the Black Belt of Alabama, particularly Dallas County, where Selma, Alabama is located.
Great. Rachel, how are you? You just came on, but you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Rachel Mowat, Department of Labor and Dreams Program.
Great.
And it's hot here.
I bet. We're just talking to David about that in Texas. I bet it's hot. Mac, how are you today?
Good. How are you guys? Afternoon, everyone. It's Mac Galabet, Senior Manager of Workforce here at Southwest Economic Solutions.
Okay. Melvin from the Fortune Society. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Melvin Rosario from Fortune Society, based in New York. We're a re-entry nonprofit working to connect folks coming home to different opportunities, and we're excited to continue our EPA program here.
It's fantastic. They've been one of our stars working with returning citizens. Keep up the good work. Olga, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My cursor is as usual all the way on the other side when it's time for me to turn my mic on. So forgive me for being so slow. Hi, I'm Olga Perry, Region 4 EPA. My pleasure to be here today to listen in, see what I can glean to help other people. Have a great day.
Thank you. It's always nice to have someone from EPA in on the PLC. Amy,
Hi there, my name is Amy Penny. I am with the Alaska Forum. We are a local nonprofit that works primarily in rural Alaska with this grant doing environmental worker training.
she always gets the prize for the furthest to come to the meeting. Always.
Yeah.
Libby, I love those dogs.
Thanks, I do too. Libby
those-
Cornell, I'm with Honeybee
those-
Strategies. Oh, those are my dogs. They're just
Okay.
mutts.
Sorry.
No worries. I'm with Honeybee Strategies and I haven't been on the call in a little while, but I'm wanting to touch base. I'm applying this year for Honeybee Strategies. So
Fantastic. Well, that's good to hear.
yeah.
Libby's got lots of experience with this program. She knows job training inside and out. So congratulations. Good luck on that.
Thank you.
Let's see, Lois. There you are.
Hi, everyone. Lois Ellis, Hampton, Ohio, Hope Whispers Community Organization. Hopefully I can get it together to ask a lot of questions.
Good, good. Michael Long.
Greetings, everyone. Michael Long. I'm with the Full Employment Council out of Kansas City, Missouri. We are a multiple-year EPA project. We're excited to be here. Looking forward to continue working with you all.
Thank you. We're looking forward to working with you. Shantae.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. Shantae Vincent, Region 3, Westfield Neighborhood House. I am an employment special needs trainer.
Okay. And Karen, we almost forgot you there.
Good afternoon, Karen Govan, Director Workforce Development here at Southwest Economic Solution in Detroit, Michigan.
Great. Okay, did we forget anybody? Well, what I also like when we introduce ourselves is to show the diversity of this program. We are all over the country and in Alaska, and our curriculum will demonstrate that, and the way we set up our programs demonstrate that. And while there are similarities in all our programs and how you train people, there are a lot of differences in the way these programs operate, and that's okay. The diversity is fantastic, and that's why we have the all grantee meeting. And it's like what we like to do. It's not a cookie cutter approach where you fill in the boxes. It's more you're describing your particular program, and that's what this is all about. Each one is a little bit different with some similarities. So we get started with Steve, who is going to tell us what's happening and talk a little bit about, after he's finished, Nolan's going to talk about the timeline on what to expect on this grant cycle. Steve?
Okay. All right. Let's start with the biggest news, and that, of course, is the FY 2024 Brownfields Job Training Solicitation, which is open, and applications are due August 2nd. So that's a date you should circle on your calendar if you're writing a proposal. That will be here before you know it. We got about 6 weeks, but time will go fast. And we'll have some information about FAQs, frequently asked questions, and links to things in the back of the notes when we send those out. Also, registration is open for Brownfields 2023, August 8th through 11th. Are many of you or any of you planning on attending National Brownfield Conference?
Going.
I see some hands. Okay, awesome. It actually begins the night before on August 7th. That's when the Environmental Justice Caucus will be held, and that will be from 5 to 7 at the Huntington Place in the Portside Ballroom, room 260. And the EJ Caucus is basically a locally driven event where people and organizations involved in environmental justice can convene, share ideas, build relationships, and communicate directly with EPA. It's actually an awesome event that they have before National Brownfields kicks off. So encourage you to attend. I know Nolan and I are planning on being there. Also, you'll have an opportunity to exhibit, as we will have a booth. We'll actually be in booth 113 at the conference if you're looking for us. We will have a place for you to, if you have some brochures you would like to market your program, we'll have, a table in place to display those, and we'll help market your program. And that's basically what we do there is to market programs around the country. So if you need a place to, serve as kind of a home base, you got a big backpack or something you don't want to carry around and you want to leave it somewhere safe, you can leave that with us. Also, if you want to meet with someone or employers or anything, you can kind of use our booth to do that too. So keep that in mind. We're looking forward to it, and we will see you in August. Also, one other thing about the conference, and I don't think either of these folks are on here today, but there'll be two individuals from the Brownfield job training program that will be presenting at the National Brownfield Conference. And that's, many of you know, Amy Walensky, who's with the Auberly Employment Institute, and also Thomas Gunter from the organization Land Force. They're both located in or around the city of Pittsburgh, and the Region 3 coordinator, Gianna Rosati, is going to be with them in a panel discussion at 3:15 on Thursday, the 10th, and it'll be in room 321. And so they're going to kind of talk about their programs and what they're doing. And it should be really good because they're both fantastic grantees. Far as some other things here, some of the frequently asked questions, we get those from time to time. One question that comes in is, does EPA require grant recipients / applicants to have a set training curriculum? What certification should I provide my students with? Good question, especially if you're, looking at submitting an application for the first time. And the response, basically, the only required training is the 40-hour HAZWOPER 1910-120. But they also offer a wide latitude of potential training opportunities depending on the local needs assessment that you do. It's also important to note that the training curriculum should align with EPA's funding priorities. There'll be more information about that in the notes in section 3. And also in the grant application itself, in paragraph 1B under use of grant funds, there's a lot of information and examples about types of training that are supported. Another question that comes up is, can we provide training requested by employers but not supported by EPA in the RFA guidelines? Another good question. And the response basically is you may, with the understanding that supplemental training will be provided without grant funding. Of course, you can provide, that additional training. Another question that comes up is, what is the average number of individuals trained during a training cycle? And grant recipients basically offer 2 to 3 training cycles per year. The number can fluctuate depending on the curriculum being offered. And in the past, an average of 20 individuals or so are trained during each cycle. But again, this number can fluctuate depending on where the training program was located. Is it urban versus rural? And the comprehensiveness of the curriculum. So it really kind of depends as far as the average number of employees trained. That's it as far as the announcements that I have. And I think at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Nolan, who's going to talk about the training, the timeline. So Nolan?
Thank you. And all of this will be in the notes. So if I go too fast, don't get panicky about scribbling. but we will put all the dates in the note. But the question usually is, now that the RFA has been issued, can we review this timeline? So the FY24 grant cycle timeline for each grantee will depend on the actual award date and when applicants are authorized to spend funds. For the FY24 grant cycle, the first 4 years will focus on program development, training delivery, and placement. The final year, the 5th year, is for completion of training, placement, tracking, and program sustainability. And milestones for the FY24 BJT cycle is variable, but it's probably going to look like this following timeline. So the grant was posted on grants.gov May 30th, and the project period, 3 years for the FY21 and 22 grants, 5 years for the FY23 and 24 grants. So one thing new this year is that the FY23 awardees cannot apply for FY24 grants. So if you just got a grant for FY23, then EPA has asked you to sit out this grant cycle. The date the applications are due on grants.gov is August 2nd, and that's 60 days from the posting date. And that's a firm date. So don't do it like your high school book report where you said, can I turn it in next week? No, that's pretty firm. The date that the notifications of those that have not passed the threshold eligibility criteria is August 17th. So 15 days out, they make a first cut. And if you did not make that first cut, EPA will let you know. And then the evaluation criteria reviews will continue through the fall and winter of 23. In early 2024, that's the date the applicants will be notified for funding consideration. And that's usually in the first quarter of 24. And that's January, February timeframe. Applications recommended for funding are likely in January. And so again, this is a recommendation for funding. It's not the guarantee of funding. The grant packages are sent to successful applicants. Award letters and acceptance by applicants need to be completed. And then you need to begin preparation for the FY25 BJT request for application. So here's the deal. If you didn't make it or you're on the bubble, again, early in 24, that's when you should probably look at what were some of those issues that you had, or if you just weren't allowed to because you had a grant in 23, but you want to begin preparing for the 25 cycle around that time. In the spring and summer of 24, work plans and grant administration paperwork is completed prior to the final award. That's 60 to 90 days after completing and submitting a grant package. The final date of award following approval of work plans, budget, and grants administration review project period. And that's, again, 3 years for the 21 grants and 22 grants, 5 years for the 23 and 24 grants. The budget period, usually concurrent to the project period, and the authorization to spend funds must be made before September 31, 2024. So again, in this process, if you are recommended for funding, there's a little bit of back and forth and work you do with the grants office and EPA. They will send you certain requirements. You have to make sure you and your organization are square with that and can also do the things that they've asked you to do. And everybody has to sign on the dotted line. From 2024 to 2028, the training cohorts continue with program refinements, partnership development, and placement improvements based on experience. So again, you know, everything should get better. You should learn, and you need to make the improvements and make sure you're keeping up with your work plans. The training and placement process progress with ACRES reporting quarterly. So if you were at the all grantee meeting, we had a presentation on ACRES. That is the reporting system. And it's very important if you have a grant that you keep up with that reporting system on a quarterly basis. In 2029, graduate placement and tracking continues. Consideration regarding program expansion, improvement, and sustainability is continued. Funding development and program continuation is considered as the completion date of the grant approaches. And then you have your final placement, tracking, program continuation plans, and grant wrap up. So many of you have been successful in getting successive grants. And so, versus a one-time thing. And also, that you had to adjust to all the different factors that you deal with in your communities. So again, the work never ends. And as I've said before, we really honor you and appreciate the work that you do, because you are all amazing and you do amazing work, and we wish you well and encourage you in the grant cycle. So for that, I'll turn it back over to Mike for selecting the curriculum.
Well, the interesting thing about this grant cycle and the interesting thing about the job training grants is they are annual. And if you're applying this year, you're in the crunch right now, between now and August 2nd. And if you're not crunching, it's time to think about next year, because as Nolan said, we'll be into the February, March timeframe, and it'll be time to start lining up for the next application. We have seen that in the last 2 years, there hasn't been a lot of changes in RFA. So we go under the assumption that next year we look at this. So after the grants are closed for the applications on August 2nd, we will start looking at what different grantees are doing, what kind of jobs they're doing. And for those of you who may not have a grant or have a grant this year and are thinking, let's apply next year, the thing to do is start looking at what other people are doing, how you may want to incorporate that in your existing program or into a new expanded program, and start thinking about the next submission for next year. So with that, we address both those people who are thinking of starting a program, those people who have programs and have had them for a while, or those people who perhaps have applied and not received a grant. There is a second and a third chance in this program, which is what's really nice about it. For people who are just starting, and actually there are probably people out there that are just starting today and saying, oh, I'd like to submit. Well, we'd like to say, we've got many people who have been working on this for 3, 4, 5 months, and it's tough to write a grant in the next 30 days. But we would not discourage you not to submit something and just to say, well, I'm not going to do anything this year. We would suggest get past that threshold. You've got the threshold criteria. You've got 2 major parts: the threshold criteria, and then the ranking criteria, which is the 200 points, where they're going through all of your critical issues and how you're going to do the job, and you need to address all of those. But if you get past the threshold and you basically have your plan laid out, even if you don't make it and you don't make the cut, you will have the opportunity next spring to talk to your regional coordinators, and you'll have a chance to find out what you might do to make your grant better, what maybe you missed the boat, or what you can do to improve it. And it'll give you that time between now and then to beef up your experience and knowledge in the area of job training and give you a good shot at it next year. So we are always encouraging people to apply. When in doubt, apply. Maybe a little more work for EPA, but I think we like to see as many people as applying. And also, if you're applying, you usually get on regional coordinator lists where they have their own little listservs, and they'll try to keep in touch with those people who are interested in applying. So it's important to try no matter what. Well, with that, let's talk a little bit about curriculum. There's several aspects of curriculum. One is selecting your curriculum. You don't necessarily have to, in this program, develop curriculum from scratch. You don't have to spend a lot of money on curriculum development because it's been done by many different people, but you have to select the proper curriculum. Once you select it and decide what you're going to train, you've got to find qualified trainers to teach it, which is really important. And the one aspect that a lot of people glance over, but I think those of you who are going to submit want to make sure you incorporate health and safety into your program or into your grant writing. people all just assume, well, it's going to be health and safety, it's going to be taken care of. If it's not in the grant proposal, it's not in the grant. So you really want to incorporate health and safety. I'm going to talk about all these things in a little bit, and then we'll talk about unsupported training, which most of us are aware of. But when you look at the RFA in selecting a curriculum, they say they have 3 criteria. We would add a few more to that, but you have to meet the labor market. You have to look at the labor market assessment, and you have to align your curriculum with the needs of the employers. This is really the most important thing, because in the end, you've got to place your graduates, and placing your graduates is going to depend on the needs of the employers. So as you're doing your labor market assessment, you really want to be thinking in the back of your mind about curriculum, and you want to be thinking about placement at the same time. You want to identify some of your heavy hitters in your community who say, well, I'll look at all your graduates, so I'm interested in your graduates. The next question is, you have to ask them, what are the skills, what are the courses, are there certifications you'd like them to have? Then you go back and you can select a curriculum that aligns with their needs. Now that curriculum may change from year to year. It could be that the people you are in contact with have needs for their brownfields needs in an area where there's a lot of lead or asbestos, and you may want to focus in that area. You may be in an area where last year they needed lead and asbestos removal, but now this year and going into the next phase of their project, they're going to be concerned about stormwater runoff. There may be, so that may change, but you always have to keep your eye on that, on your employers. And of course, you're going to do that through your advisory committees, which we've talked about in the past. Your advisory committees hopefully will always have your employers on them. And your employers will also hopefully bond with your program and write letters of recommendation that they would be interested in, not necessarily hiring, but at least looking. They like the program and they would like to interview your graduates. And you would want to make sure that you have this in your proposal, because again, the purpose of this program is to place graduates. That's number one. The second thing is you've got to meet and align your program with the funding authority that EPA has. It's something that we don't talk about, and EPA doesn't talk about it a lot, but when you think about it, Office of Brownfield Land and Revitalization, OBLR, has a mission, which there are other program offices in EPA. There's Office of Wastewater, wastewater treatment plants, air programs. The OBLR people are interested in brownfields and those issues, hazardous materials, waste issues, and their program is geared towards those issues. In the old days, they used to get additional funding from other program offices within EPA, and they expanded the types of courses that you could train to. Lately, in the last several years, they have decided to focus on OBLR activities. And so they have, and it's in the list of activities 1B in terms of the programs that they're supporting, which is very important, because you don't want to go whole hog and start training wastewater treatment operators, even though you find out that's where the big need is in your program. It's not really fundable through this. And what EPA would end up doing was having to take that curriculum out of your grant. If you had a super grant and you were trying to fund programs that had nothing to do with the mission of OBLR, they would have to remove that training from the grant or deduct points of some sort if the rest of your program was fantastic. So you definitely want to line it, and it is well spelled out in the RFA, and I put some of those in the notes. A good rule of thumb is link it to brownfields. This is about brownfields and land revitalization. If you link your program, whatever it is, link it to brownfields or land revitalization, stormwater, that might affect brownfields. Deconstruction, as it refers to cleaning up brownfields. Everything that you do, if you attach the, as it relates to brownfields, you're giving yourself a little bit of insurance that this is a program that's within the realm of what EPA is authorized to do. So you just don't want to end up programs in there that don't fit. And this gives you a tremendous amount of latitude because many things have to do with associated with Superfund or land brownfields related activities, whether it's or hazmat, if it has to do with hazardous materials or land revitalization. So I would just caution that you go through the list of the priorities of OBLR and make sure that whatever courses you decide to teach, they fit in there and they fit with the mission of the organization. The other thing that's in there that's a sleeper that everyone forgets to talk about is sustainability practices. And again, that's almost like health and safety, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. People forget to, in their proposal, to talk about sustainability practices. What are you going to do in terms of your training, in terms of sustainability? And you might say, well, that's kind of an odd thing to talk about, but not really. And there's lots of strategies you could use. One of the obvious is replacing textbook printed materials, say with tablets, or using digital training of some sort. You might be doing some remote training. Certainly a lot of this requires printed material and some it has, you have no choice but to use things that may or may not be sustainable. But in terms of chemistry, chemicals you use, how that relates to sustainability. Another area you may want to consider that people don't think about is transportation. Are your training facilities way on the other side of town, or are they close to your target community? In other words, a simple thing like mentioning we are training in the target community and linking that to sustainability and good practices as far as sustainability goes. This is where you want to include it in there where no one else may do that. And of course, whenever you're writing a grant, this will give you a jump on the other people. When we talk about 1 or 2 percentage points making the difference, whether you're approved for the grant or not, things like this can make a big difference. So you want to make sure you have good sustainability practices and that you would definitely address it. We'll talk a little bit about when we talked about employer needs, the whole area of certifications and what those means. You're going to have to be careful. Another sleeper in this RFA that I noticed was they want to make sure that, particularly when you're teaching HAZWOPER 1910-120, that you're doing real HAZWOPER, not fake HAZWOPER. There are a lot of, I wouldn't say they're charlatans, but the online training. I see Deborah has been there before. There are a lot of people out there willing to train. And what does that training really mean? Certifications are a slippery slope. They're really almost in the eyes of the beholder or the employer. HAZWOPER and OSHA courses are those things that are strictly regulated. OSHA was actually formed to standardize training to health and safety of workers. And they wanted to make sure that training standards, whether you received it in California or in Illinois or in Florida, that those standards would hold across the country. So they set up the whole OSHA certification system. Now, your training is going to be very diverse. It may include some OSHA courses. It'll have HAZWOPER, which is an OSHA, they call that OSHA 40 or 1910-120, which is very strictly regulated. And they point out in the RFA that make sure that you've got that face-to-face in-person component, which someone may try to sell you on, oh, we can do this digitally and we can take care of this and give you a cert. Well, I don't know what that cert would really mean. So you want to make sure that it conforms to all of the OSHA standards. Lead and asbestos, for example, those require often approved curriculum, whether it's by EPA or some of the states. Each state has their own certification requirements. So if you're going to teach lead and asbestos, if you're going to do RRP, you've got strict regulations and approval of the curriculum that you've got to adhere to. Your state may have taken over some of these responsibilities, and you want to make sure that whatever you're training, you're not going out of state when you're looking for your trainers, and that they're providing you training that really isn't applicable in your state. And when you go to place these people, and if it's a lead or asbestos removal place, they may say, well, I see you've got the cert, but it really doesn't mean anything in our state. So you want to make sure that that certification is valid. A lot of states, as I said, have their own state certs, and some have specific certs for specific things. It may not be something that you'd be normally aware of. It may be something like a flagger. They may have a certified flagger who is basically, he's head whopper, and he's on a brownfield site directing traffic. And maybe there's a cert that state has that says that employee is certified to be flagger, which means he perhaps has received 1910-120 and he's had some hazmat material handling experience, and so he's certified in that state. And then there's the third-party certifications that happens often with the Building Institute, for example, where you're talking about what type of environmental standards you have in terms of energy efficiency. That's not so much anymore an issue in this program, but when you're talking about building efficiency in any way, shape, or form, now you're talking about the BMI standards. And so these individual third-party certifications are something that you've got to keep an eye on. So when you're looking at your courses and you decide you're going to do these particular courses because these are the ones that your employer says that he would like you to do, you want to double check those courses and find out, are there state requirements? What are the specific requirements so that person can be employed by that person, by that employer? Of course, we have in the notes some of the popular curriculum, OSHA 40, we've talked about several times. There's one construction course, the general construction course. That's one of the things that's a no-no on the list of things that have nothing to do with EPA, with the exception of the general construction, because it has to do with hazmat health and safety. So the OSHA 30 general construction course is something that most people have because it's involved in health and safety. And while it has to do with construction, and EPA explicitly says you cannot teach construction courses, you can teach this course. Confined space, of course, is a very popular one, particularly if you're teaching lead and asbestos removal. CDL and forklift, you've got to be a little careful. Again, as I said earlier, link it to brownfields or hazardous materials. If it's going to be CDL, it's got to have a link to hazardous materials transport. If it's forklift, it's got to have a link to moving hazardous materials. So don't just do a forklift curriculum. Don't do, in fact, you might even want to label it forklift of hazardous materials or forklift of CDL transport of hazardous materials. Stormwater management is a very popular one. We've talked about lead and asbestos and first aid. Health and safety is okay, again, if it has to do with the courses that you're teaching in hazardous materials. Once you've established types of courses you want to teach, and you've got a good feel for the cadre that you can employ, once the certifications they'll have when they graduate, now you've got to go out and find a qualified trainer. And as I alluded to before, be very careful when you're doing this. And there's a lot of sources for qualified trainers. We've talked about many of them already. OSHA is a big one, the OSHA Institute, and we'll have these in the notes. OSHA has training. Mostly their training is in construction and safety, but some of them are courses you may be able to use. Another source of trainers, of course, is the NIHS people. NIHS is a health and safety program. It does many of the things that we do in EPA. They focus very, very heavily on health and safety, and they were organized to protect the health and safety of people working at hazardous material sites. And NIHS has an elaborate, and many of you have been associated with the NIHS program. They have 18 grantees currently that are working in this area, developing curriculum, and they do a variety of things. Some do train the trainer, some do direct training, some are training people in disadvantaged areas. And we'll have the addresses of these, but for example, the ones that you may be familiar listening to are PLCs as the PEAT program, which is CCHST, the Community College Consortium. They have a boot camp for training trainers, and you could apply for that. And in fact, they have asked HFTRI, and we have given us priority for any of our grantees who would like to certify their own in-house trainers to go through this boot camp that they have every year and receive credentials so they could do in-house training. Another program is Sustainable Workplace Alliance. They are newer to the program. They're an NIHS grantee. They are also a Brownfield job training grantee. Some of you have used them for training. So I would look at the NIHS programs when you're looking at certified trainers because they all have met the requirements. There are also community colleges and universities who may have programs for credit, and they may have professors or programs set up to do HAZWOPER. And again, you want to just make sure that they are real HAZWOPER training programs. They may often, because of community requirements, have health and safety. As I had previously said, you may be getting your trainers from multiple sources. You may be getting some that have to do with OSHA training, which may be different from some that are doing RRMP or asbestos training. You may have a stormwater program that's coming out of a university. So you don't feel you need one trainer to do all of your training curriculum. It's very important to spread that out for a lot of reasons. As a matter of fact, we've had instances where a program used a private consultant. They had gone through the OSHA Institute. They were certified. Everything was good, except they closed. And here they were in the middle of their program without a trainer. So they were up a creek. Now, certainly you can Google trainers in my community and probably find all kinds of trainers. And again, those are the ones you have to be careful of and watch who's doing it and how they're doing it. These are the third-party trainers. Another source of trainers you may want to look at is the local emergency response agencies. For example, the fire department. I think that Chris, who's not on the call today, Chris Litzow, has had tremendous success working with the local fire department, who not only might provide trainers, but might provide facilities, training pads to institute the training at their facility. So there's lots of different places to get trainers, and there's a lot of trainers out there. So don't panic, but give yourself plenty of time to search for the trainers that you feel would be appropriate. When you're writing a grant, I know it's very difficult because they're asking you for costs of training and your training program. And you ask the question, which is fair, is how do I do this? Because I'm just starting out. And you have to approach this in a couple of ways. More experienced grantees already have trainers online. They're already hired, and you can go to those trainers. If you're bringing in new trainers, you will have to go to them with an understanding that after you receive this grant, you need to go out and competitive bid. But you would like their assistance in helping you out with the cost of training and these training schedules. Excuse me. Another thing you need to do is sometimes it's possible, and it depends on your program and how you're set up, you may be able to bring these trainers on board you may be able to vet your trainers early with the understanding that you would get the grant and that your training schedule and their training schedule would work. In other words, you always want to make sure that you have the out, that it's got the training that they're doing has to conform to all of the other requirements we talked about, whether it's site of training, the type of training, when the training is going to be. And with that understanding that if they are not already vetted and contracted out to you, that you're going to have to go out for a review. And you may want to go to several trainers as I decided. You may be going to several sources for your training. Some of your training, which we'll talk about in just a second, will be in-kind training, but I'm talking about mostly the technical courses. You may want to go to several of the people that would do training and get an idea of what these courses would cost, and indicate that you would be going out for bid when you get the grant proposal. The one thing I mentioned earlier that people forget to talk about, and I hate to use the word would cost you points, but I would like to use the word, if you have it in your proposal or in your program, it's a plus for your program. You definitely want to address health and safety. And what do I mean by health and safety? I'm talking about health and safety during training, but I'm also considering health and safety after training. You do not want to have a graduate go to an employer, and we'll talk about this more when we talk about placement. You do not want to have a graduate go to an employer who is not practicing health and safety to your satisfaction. You definitely do not want to put your students in danger during training. And this brings up also the whole idea of liability and liability waivers. If you're using third-party trainers, who's indemnifying who? And you want to get this straight before you get started. If you're working with a community college, is the community college covering that? If you're an independent nonprofit, are you indemnifying your students during training, particularly things that might involve health and safety, where you may be doing fit up, you may be working with chemicals or equipment that someone might get hurt, or you're doing confined space where they may trip and fall. You definitely want to do that, and you want to make it clear who is responsible for what and to what extent are they required. Now, many of you with bigger organizations, this will be a given. You'll have to do this, and you'll have the insurance in place before you can go much further. But if you're smaller, you may want to consider that. And what kind of, if you're going to have liability waivers, how is that going to be structured? You definitely want to have your students, if they're involved in anything that might involve injury, have them sign some sort of liability waiver if you can. And you also, another thing is, you want to, particularly on something like HAZWOP, you want to do pre and post tests. And if you're using an instructor that you're hiring that you don't know about, make sure you get copies of that, the goals and objectives, and pre and post tests. Because the purpose of this is what happens in the event that you're teaching them hazardous materials, how to handle it, and they are placed, and something goes wrong and they're injured. Then the question is, what happens to the employer? Is he going to say, well, he wasn't trained properly. Are they going to come back to you? And ideally, you're going to have the pre and post test and say, this is what he knew before. He covered all of the points. So we did everything we were required to do and that we advertised. So this, if you hopefully never get to this point, it would give you that insurance. And so address health and safety, not only on the job during training, but once you place your students. So that's kind of covers the technical curriculum, but we're going to talk just a few minutes before we end about unsupported training. I kind of divide, when people look at unsupported, they're thinking of the non-technical skills. I'm also talking about, as we mentioned early on, there's two types of unsupported training: the technical training, which might have to do with things in construction or wastewater treatment operators or air programs or equipment repair, all of those things that EPA said they wouldn't fund. What happens, as I said before, when you have an employer and your needs assessment says, I need someone with HAZWOPER and all the things you teach, but I'd like to have them also learn these other things. And you could say, well, we could do that if we could get the funding, and he may even provide you the funding or the resources to do those. As long as they're not in the grant, it's okay. That would give your other students a head up in terms of supplying the employer needs. It may be the deal closer that he might say, well, okay, I need to do this, but they have to have this particular course that I really want them to have, or this particular certification, and it doesn't appear that it's on your agenda. Well, don't let that stop you. That's one part, and that's a technical training part of curriculum. The other part is the non-tech, which we're all familiar with. These are the life skills, the work readiness skills, the financial literacy, the life coaching, verbal skills and development, all of those things that people need to get a job, but EPA doesn't support. And as you've probably noticed through this discussion and after reading RFA, the EPA money has a very narrow smokestack. It has to do with activities from OBLR, and it has to do with brownfields. Unfortunately, it can't fund these other programs, and there's good reasons for that. It's the way the money comes down through CERCLA. In this case, it's the way the money comes down through the bipartisan infrastructure bill in this go around. But the fact is that they will not support this type of training. Fortunately, there are many people who will. And we've talked about it in the past, but these are the courses where you use your leverage partners, your workforce readiness, your financial literacy, which banks are happy to provide financial literacy programs, life coaching. You can go to your social service agencies, your Goodwill. Another reason to locate your programs where there are other social service agencies that can help you support your program. So these are non-technical programs. We don't have to worry so much about certifications. We don't have to worry about aligning anything with EPA, but they're courses that will get them the job when they go in, whether they feel comfortable talking to the employer, whether they know how to handle their money, all of those services that we'll talk about actually in the next, and another PLC, all of those things that make them a well-rounded person, you want to make sure. So if we sum up this whole idea of curriculum, I think curriculum, when all is said and done, is going to get back to your employers and what do your employers want. And if you align your program with your employers, you're going to have a heck of a lot easier job placing them because you've already been in contact with them. You're essentially working as an agent of your employers to some extent, and they would like to see these particular programs. And that's number one, and they'll look at your students. And in addition to that, it has to align with the funding that EPA will provide. And then after that, I think that you can demonstrate in your grant or as you go along that you are consistent with EPA priorities, you're consistent with your employer priorities. And that should get you where you need as far as curriculum goes. Does anyone have any questions about curriculum, or what have they noticed in their curriculum? Anyone confronted with, I don't want to say use the word charlatans, but many people who are willing to train their students and find out later that, no, this isn't exactly what we need. That's a tough lesson to learn. But, okay. Any other questions?
Mike,
Yes.
one thing we didn't announce, and that is we sent out the notes from the all grantee meeting with the links. Actually, Nolan sent them out, and I think he had a couple of bounce backs because the file might have been too big for your mailbox or something. But those were sent out in the last few days to everybody that registered for the all grantee meeting, which is many of you here. So if you haven't checked your inbox, you might want to check them to see if you received them. But we sent out all of the PowerPoint presentations from the EPA people. We also sent a PDF of all the notes from all those breakout sessions that did take us quite a bit of time to put those all together, but they're all there. And then also a link to the video from the city of Springfield, Missouri that gave that little presentation, and also the young lady Antonia, her short video was also included in that. So all of that was sent to you. So if you should have received it.
Yeah, Steve, on the bounce backs that were too large, I broke those up into multiple emails and sent those out. Probably about an hour ago. Yeah, and so basically everybody who attended should have received it. Now, if you didn't attend the all grantee meetings, you did not. So you need to contact us if you want that package. So if you did not attend the all grantee meeting, and it's not a shame on you, it's like, oh snap, you missed a big one. But if you want those notes from the breakout sessions, then we did have fabulous facilitators and scribes for that, as well as the presentations on the legal aspects on acres, and there's and on environmental EJ screen process. We can send those to you, but you need to tell us that you need them. So if you would send me, Mike, or Steve an email saying, hey, I'd really like the notes from the all grantee meeting, we will consider you as receiving that gift. Happy to do it.
One thing I was going to ask, since Karen and Deborah are here and they're active, did you guys receive them? You did. Karen did.
Yes, yes.
Awesome. Okay.
Good.
Perfect. Okay.
Retrogressing on when we're talking about curriculum, if you want to be a little bit voyeuristic, you can go to the Brownfields toolbox, which needs updating. But if you go to the Brownfields toolbox and go to the employer finder, certified employee finder, there are many of the programs listed there, and as part of those listings of what people are offering are some of the courses. So you may want to breeze through there every once in a while and see what some of the other grantees are training in terms of their programs. Through the winter, we have job training programs talk about their programs, which talks about their curriculum. But if you want to kind of breeze through to see what some of the other programs are doing, that will give you a hint. And of course, yours will be different, but some of the courses may be similar.
The other good reason to do that is to check your own, what we have for you, because if anything's changed, like curriculum dates, names, phone numbers, anything, we're going to be showing QR codes at our booth during the National Brownfield Conference. We want to make sure when they go to your page, if they're looking at your information, everything's current, accurate. So let us know if it isn't.
kind of like walking into someone's house. We have to apologize. It's not totally up to date. So there might be some old stuff when you first walk into our website, but when you go in there, you could breeze around. Most of the things are pretty current, particularly the employee finder. And of course, you find old PLC's notes and recordings on the same website. It's a Brownfields toolbox.
Mike, I think those PLC notes are up to date all the way through is that the last one,
53.
294? Oh, okay.
293. So that's the one before last.
Okay, so they're pretty much up to date.
We'll try to get those updated for you. Anything else?
Yeah,
Well,
I'm sending a response to David Cantu. So
good. Those of you who are applying, I would focus on that threshold criteria. Make sure you get past that threshold, because if you can't get past the threshold, you're not going to go much further. So you want to make sure that you don't pass over that. Everything they want, supply. And of course, we'll talk about this at a later PLC, but this is just strategy as you write your grants. Answer every question. They're going to look at every question and look for the answers in those questions, and also be as analytical as possible. I'm getting into another topic of a PLC, but make sure that you are very analytical and making sure you're answering every question as you write these proposals, and definitely submit if you can, no matter what that outcome is going to be. Okay, well, thanks everybody for attending. We'll be back in 2 weeks and we'll be talking placement and tracking, but we're also going to be talking about these do's and don'ts of landmines that you have to be careful with if you apply for one of these grants. Steve, you
Thanks,
could probably,
guys.
thank you. You could probably turn off our recording.